Hello, it's Zahra Sethna, host of the Collapse Life podcast. Nice to have you with us. You'll know today's guest as the founder and leader of the People's Party of Canada, and you may recognize him as someone who's been a guest on this podcast before. He's not only a mainstay in Canadian politics, he's also a lawyer and an economist with intimate knowledge of how Canada's capital, Ottawa, gets things done. Maxime Bernier joins us today to help us parse through the recently announced 2024 Canadian budget and what it says about the future of Canada. And that's not just relevant to our Canadian viewers, but we also want to understand it here in America, as it seems like more and more what happens up north keeps seeping southward. Americans should be paying attention to what's happening, and Max is definitely the man to talk us through it. So, Maxime, welcome back to Collapse Life. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity. I'm very pleased to be with you.
Yeah, and as we said, you're definitely the man for the job to help us understand not only the budget but what's happening up in Canada. So, but before we dive into the details, I just want to give our viewers a little bit of background on why you're so well positioned to talk about this topic and economics in general. You used to work at a free market think tank for many years, and you're a big believer in Austrian economics and small government. Do I have that right?
Absolutely, you're right.
Talk
Yes,
a little bit about your kind of approach then.
I discovered the Australian School of Economics a couple of years ago. I did a degree in finance, a diploma in finance in Montreal, and after that, I did my diploma in law. So I'm a lawyer, and but I work in the private sector, in the financial sector. In Montreal, and also, like you just said, I worked also with the Montreal Economic Institute. That's a free market think tank, very well known in Quebec, and I was VP over there. And when I decided to jump into politics in 2006, that was for for Canadians and for me to be sure that we will have a smaller government in Ottawa that will give us more freedom. And that was all about the economy at that time. But now, it's still important, but also we need to speak about culture, immigration, that is
Mm.
transforming our country here in Canada, like you in the US. And, I like to read Mrs. Rothbard. Actually, every morning I'm going to the MisesInstitute.org and reading their articles over there.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I like to be sure that the government will respect our rights and our freedoms. And that's
Yeah.
why I went into politics in 2006, and that's why I'm still in politics.
Yeah. It's a hard slog here in North America with that kind of an agenda. But since we last spoke, someone with very similar ideas, Javier Milei, was just elected president of Argentina, and there was a lot of hope. There's also a lot of skepticism, but a lot of hope that he brings by kind of breaking through with a very similar message to the one that you have. But also seems a little bit like an impossible task that he's up against. Do you find any inspiration in what he was able to achieve in Argentina?
Oh, yes, yes. And I know that it is difficult for him over there, but he's doing the right thing. He tried to impose and transform the country with his vision and his reforms, more free markets. And it's very difficult to do that, but he's doing the right thing,
Mhm.
starting that in the beginning of his mandate. Because when you do big reforms, more free markets, less government, deregulations, and and you have to started that earlier, because the benefit of that will be a little bit later, just maybe at the end of your mandate. Yeah, it's for us in Canada. I'm looking at him, and I hope that our country won't go down the road like his country,
Yeah.
but we never know. So we need to be there. We need to speak about our values. We need to convince more people for a smaller government, and it's tough these days. But I believe that we can win because we have a mid and long term vision for this
Mhm.
country, for Canada.
I was going to say, do you think things have to get as bad in Canada as they did in Argentina before people start to wake up and say, we need something new? We need another alternative that's not just this unit party.
Yes, a uni party in Canada. We have, the Conservative Party that is supposed to be conservative, but they're only conservative in name, a little bit
Mhm.
like like the Republican in the U.S. sometimes, and we have the Liberals on the most important issues for the future of our country. They have the same policy, big government spending, not respecting the Constitution, mass immigration. So we will be in election in October 2025 in Canada, a
Mhm.
national election, and maybe people will change the government, but it will be almost the same. So it's too bad, but things will maybe that will the we are in the beginning of a economic recession right now in Canada, and we may have a stagnation or depression that can happen in our country. And maybe when it will happen, more people will wake up and say, okay, now, we're changing for the liberals and the conservatives and the liberals. We need to have a new option. And the
Yeah.
People's Party of Canada represents that option for Canadians.
Yeah. Are you going to bring out a chainsaw on the campaign trail like Millet did?
No, I won't. But I said that couple of the last election actually, and our first election in 2019, because as you know, we are a young party. We we created the People's Party in Canada in 2018, so about 5 years ago. And I was speaking about, we have a program in Canada that it's called uh, in our constitution, the redistribution of wealth between provinces. And I said we must cut that.
Mhm.
It's a bad incentive. We need to put the real incentives for provinces to develop more free markets policies.
Mhm.
And yes, I was speaking about abolishing, foreign aid, abolishing corporate welfare. In Canada, we are giving about $10 billion every year to corporations. If a corporation is not profitable, that's it. We have a legislation in Canada called the bankruptcy legislation. So you go bankrupt and that's it. That's the free markets. Why? Taxpayers will give their money to a corporation that is not able to have customers because they don't have a good products or they don't want to buy it. People are voting with their dollars, and the state must not be there to protect these crony capitalists. So yes, I was speaking about that, and we need to do a reform like that in Canada. And actually, the Conservative Party of Canada, um, they are not speaking about balancing the budget. We have a deficit of $40 billion, and
Yeah.
it's huge for our country. And they're saying, "Oh, it's not so important. We will spend money that we don't have." And
Right.
for us, we know that it's doable to balance the budget in 1 year by cutting all these subsidies. And after that, we need to be able to lower taxes to every Canadian.
Right. I mean, so spend is pretty much the theme, it seems, of this new budget. So let's talk about it. So the new budget was presented by the Liberal government April 16th by the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Christopher Freeland. It is titled Fairness for Every Generation. Um, but it's pretty much spending. No budget, no balancing the deficit, nothing like that. So how would you characterize it? What's your kind of take on it?
It's a anti-growth budget. It's a budget that is giving money to Canadians, money that we don't have,
Right.
by creating huge deficit. And because of that, the inflation will still be there, and Canadians will pay for that with the inflation tax. Actually, in Canada, the official inflation is about 3%. But we know that the way that the federal government is calculating inflation with the basket of goods and services is not adequate. That's not representative of the real inflation. And we believe that the real inflation is more between 6 and 8%. So the federal government is spending money, but worst of that, the federal government is not respecting our constitution, because in Canada, housing, healthcare, it's under provincial jurisdictions and not the federal government. So the federal government, the Trudeau government, try to buy votes by spending money in jurisdiction that is not under his constitutional responsibilities. So he's not respecting the Constitution. He's spending money that we don't have. Try to buy votes and creating a huge deficit. The deficit will be $40 billion. And actually, what is also concerning with that budget is when Trudeau was elected in 2015, the interest on our debt was about $24 billion a year. $24 billion a year that Canadians were giving just to pay the interest on our debt. Now, the interest on the debt is about $54 billion a year. Trudeau doubled the interest that we have to pay each year on our debts. So $54 billion is all the revenues that the federal government is collecting under the GST, the good and service tax. It's a consumption tax. So $54 billion each year that Canadians are paying under the GST in Canada, all that will go to pay the interest on our debts. So it's not sustainable. We need to stop that. And the Conservative Party, that is supposed to be fiscally responsible, they're not speaking about that. That for them, that's not important.
So what are some of the ways that we could get back to a balanced budget? If all of the income is going to just pay to service the debt, then I don't know how they're planning on paying for any of the services that they include in the budget, which we'll talk about for the CBC and for housing and for all these other things. So what are some of the ways? What are some of your ideas?
Yeah, so like I said, we have the GST in Canada. The federal government is receiving $54 billion. All that money will go to pay the interest on our debt this year. And the federal government also receive money from the income tax and other taxes. But that being said, we are in a deficit. And so what is happening to Canada is we are growing our debt. And actually, Trudeau doubled the debt of our country since 2015 when he was elected. So doubled the debt in 9 years, 9 years, doubled the interest that we have to pay on that debt. And just because for him, the budget is not so important, balancing the budget is not important. So we are paying Canadians by inflation. And because a lot of that deficit will have to come from the Bank of Canada. Like the Bank of Canada, what they did, and other also countries did the same. They printed money out of thin air to pay for all the programs during the COVID hysteria, the COVID lockdowns. They were saying to their population, stay at home, don't do anything, don't work. The federal government will give you money that we don't have, by the way, money coming from the Bank of Canada, and we created inflation. And with that deficit, that may be the same. We won't stop inflation, and it's the tax. So we are paying right now. People are saying, oh, my children and grandchildren will pay for these for that debt and these deficit. It is not true. We are paying right now with the inflation tax, and that inflation will be there for the next couple of years. So that's why we need to be responsible and cut all these programs that we cannot afford.
One of the contentious things that was in the budget was an increase in capital gains tax. So especially for smaller entrepreneurs and Canadian businesses, they were really feeling a pinch here. It actually stifles the motivation for small entrepreneurs to start businesses because they're already paying a lot in this capital gains tax, and it's now gone up. It's gone, I think, if I'm correct, from 50% on. There's a cap at $250,000, but beyond that, from 50% to 66% or something like that. Can you just talk a little bit about what that means for Canadian business owners?
But actually, I must say that I was very happy with the reaction coming from the mainstream media in Canada, the economists and journalists about that. I believe that the Trudeau government tried to sell that tax, saying, the rich will pay, and that's a good tax. We must tax the rich, and we are doing that as a political party, as a government. But the reaction of the media was the opposite, and that was the good reaction. They were saying, you are not, it's not the rich who are going to pay for that, because they will find other ways to not pay taxes. It will be the real entrepreneur, the small entrepreneurs, or the mom and dad who invest in a real estate, and they will want to sell that real estate. They will have, because up to $250,000, you don't pay any capital gains tax. But with the inflation, $250,000, that's nothing. That's
Hmm.
nothing. So when you sell your house, or you want to sell the goods that you're having, the investment that you have, you will pay. So every entrepreneurs, Canadians, will have to pay that extra tax. And you're right, it was 50%, now it's about 66%. So it will hurt Canadian entrepreneurs, and mom and dad who had a business and decided to invest in real estate for their pension. If when they will decide to sell that
Hmm.
asset, they will have to pay that increase of the capital gains tax. So the reaction of the media was a nice surprise for me,
Hmm.
because they were saying the real thing. They were saying, "Oh no, it's hurting every Canadians, not only the rich, and the
Yeah.
rich won't be affected by that." So it's a very bad tax, but also the reaction of the opposition party, the Conservative Party of Canada, on that. Pierre Poilievre, the leader, didn't say anything about that. Didn't want to, because as I said before when I was with you, Pierre Poilievre is doing business by polling and focus group. And I believe that he didn't have time to do a focus group about the reaction on that tax. So
Hmm.
he was silent a couple of days after the budget, and maybe we'll know his position a little bit later. But if you're a conservative government, you must be able to balance the budget and being fiscally responsible and lower taxes. But Poilievre was silent about that.
Yeah. You touched on an interesting thing because it does seem, at least from where we sit, kind of looking from the outside into Canada, it seems like since we last spoke that there is a little bit more public discontent. Certainly on social media, we're seeing this array of posts from people sharing their frustration about inflation and grocery prices and all of that. But even in the media, as you said, there are more critical op-eds even in mainstream publications like the National Post and the Financial Post. Does it feel as though things are shifting, maybe that there is a little bit of pushback now that hasn't been there in the last couple of years?
Yes, actually, on the economy, and also you can add to that immigration, the mass immigration policy. Because of that, right now, every Canadian are poor. The economy grow because we have more people, but the growth of the population is faster than the growth of the economy. So our GDP per capita is going down. It's a mass immigration, these deficit, the spending, the inflation, all that together, our standard of living is going down in Canada.
Yeah.
And more and more people understand that. They're doing their grocery. They want to buy a house. It's very difficult. Interest rates are higher than they were a couple of months before. And if you want to rent also in the big cities like Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, it's very expensive. So you add all that together, and the fact that the Trudeau government is in the last year, the election will be in October. I don't believe that Trudeau will be able to win the next election.
Mhm.
Uh, Poilievre may be able to win, and for us, for the People's Party, that will be an opportunity, because I believe that Poilievre, after 4 years, he won't be able to do all these important reforms and big reforms, and that we need to do in Canada. He will try to please everybody, and that will be another opportunity for the People Party to grow after the next election. So yes, you're right. People are feeling the pain right now, and they know that they're not richer than they were; they're poorer, and and it's why it's very difficult for the Trudeau government, actually right now in the polls. And that's why Poilievre doesn't have to explain his platform. He just have to be out there and critic of Trudeau. and he believes that he
Mm-hmm.
will be a prime minister, and maybe he will be, but that's bad because you need to have real changes and a kind of a revolution in Canada to be able to go back to our country, what our country was a couple of years ago, and now it's going in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. But that's
Mm-hmm.
why the People's Party exists. We are speaking about the real issues, and they are coming more and more popular. Actually, on immigration, there we Léger did a polls in Canada just to and asking the immigrants community if they're okay with the mass immigration, open borders, immigration policy from the federal government, and 42 of them said no, that's too much.
Mm-hmm.
So now everybody, if you look at the population together, about maybe half of the population are saying enough is enough. We need to stop that mass immigration. So I was speaking about that in 2019, and that was not that popular. So now it's more popular, and that's why the People's Party would be able to grow. So we
Mm-hmm.
need also to balance the budget, and all the money that the federal government is giving to Ukraine. It's about $10 billion in Canada. Uh, we are the only party, as you may know, that is against the war in Ukraine. We will bring back that money home, help Canadian first, put our country first. And I had a question also from somebody about what is happening in Middle East and in Gaza. And they asked me, Maxime, are you pro-Hamas or pro-Israel? I said, I'm pro-Canada. I'm
Yeah.
pro-Canada. We need to focus on our country and help Canadians first.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you finding as you go kind of closer to the next election that you're having an easier time talking to people about these issues? And I know one of the things we talked about last time is the media have not been kind to you or make it easier for you to get your message out. So are you seeing any kind of shifts or softening there? People wanting to hear more from you?
Yes, absolutely. It's a little bit better than it was a year ago, maybe because we are closer from the election. People are more interested. Actually, we are doing right now a call for candidates. As you may know, in Canada, if you want to run a national campaign and having a candidate in every riding in our country, we need to have 338 candidates in the 338 ridings, and we had about 150 candidates selected and approved up to now. And I believe that we'll be able to have a full slate of candidates before the end of this year. So that's great. And so there's a momentum. I'm traveling across the country, and I'm telling people, if you want to change, be part of the change, be the change. And you can be a candidate for the People's Party. And the reaction is very good. Now, we are doing a lot of interviews with the future candidates, and so people, they know that the election is coming October 2025. It's like tomorrow. It's not
Mhm.
so far, and we need to be ready for that. And also they understand that I may not be Prime Minister of Canada after that election, but the most important is for our ideas to grow and being more influential. And that's happening at every day because, like you said in the beginning, the situation is worse in Canada than it was a year ago. And when you have that, people are looking at a new alternative. They have these two mainstream political parties, liberals and conservative, and us, the new party. So more people are curious and they are asking questions about our platform. And that's, but I don't have also the national coverage that with that I'm supposed to have, because
Yeah.
as you know, we had more votes than the Green Party of Canada, and at 5% at the last election. But the mainstream media, they don't want to cover us. But for me, traveling, meeting people, being on social media, we will be able to grow.
Mhm.
And the good news is, these establishment political parties, decided at the last election that they didn't want me to be on the national stage to debate against Trudeau and all these establishment leaders. They created a new rule, 4% of us. We had 1.6 before, so we had 5%. Now I'll be there, and that will give us more coverage from the mainstream media because we will be part of these national debates at the next electoral campaign, and that will give us more visibility. So I'm looking to the future, and I'm pretty sure that this party will grow. We almost triple our score from our first election 2019 to our second election 2021. Now with 5%, if we double that to 10, that's a good growth, and we may have some candidates elected.
Mm-hmm. It's a very different system in the United States than it is in Canada, but it's interesting that at the same time as you are trying to grow this third party, um, in the United States, we have an independent candidate, Robert Kennedy Jr. Also, are you watching what's happening there, and what do you think? Do you think that there's um, some burgeoning kind of a movement here to kind of break away from having just two choices that don't seem very different from each other?
Yeah, that will be very interesting, your election in the US this year. And yes, I'm following Robert Jr. Kennedy and Mr. Trump. And that's, he has a good momentum. I believe in the poll, he was around 25 or 20%. I don't remember. But for an independent, it's great. And more people are fed up with the statu quo, and they're looking for a new alternative. So that can happen also in Canada. We are that new alternative. And what is happening in the US, usually that's having an impact in Canada. So if Trump is elected, or you have Kennedy that is doing very well, that will have an influence in our country. And that may be good news for us, for the People's Party.
So, Max, one of the things in the budget is more money for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is pretty much one of the main ways that most Canadians have access to the news. They already have a $1.3 billion budget, and now this budget includes another $42 million. At the same time, there seems to be even more censorship of alternate media and dissident voices and things like that. So, talk a little bit about how does that make sense? What's going on?
Yeah, for Trudeau, the CBC is very important. The CBC is the propaganda arms of the Liberal Party of Canada, and $1.3 billion. For us, it's we will cut that because we want the media to be independent, not dependent on the government and for money. So if the CBC is not able to raise money from their own, they'll go bankrupt, and that's it. But also, the federal government is giving $500 million to other mainstream media, mainstream newspapers like the Global Mail and other newspaper across the country. And also with the tax system, the federal government is giving subsidies to journalists. So we need to end all that. We need to cut all that spending, and that's why you don't want the media to depend on the government for money. That's not a real democracy. So, but the Trudeau government is doing that. But worse than that, we have independent media in Canada that are not receiving any money from the government, and that's good. But what the Trudeau government wants to do is to there's a bill in the House, and for being sure that the independent media will be under the control of Justin Trudeau, he wants them to registered, and being they will look at what they're saying, and they can be censored. And so that's and also there's another bill, the bill C-63, that is against hate speech, and hate speech on social media, but also not only on social media, in the real life. So, but that bill is going very far. So if you have somebody that is saying, oh, Bernier may say something that is hateful, and that person can make a complaint against me, and if I'm guilty, I can be in jail for life, in jail for life. So the federal government try to impose to you his point of view and his vision of the society. So the federal government doesn't want to for you to tell you, he doesn't want Canadians to tell what they really think.
Right.
And actually, if that bill is enforced, I'll be the first one to go in jail because, I'm politically incorrect. And the federal government and the establishment politicians doesn't like what I'm saying. Like during COVID-19, they didn't like what I was saying, freedom of choice, informed consent. And what they did, they didn't allow me to debate against them. So now that bill C-63, if that bill is enforced, that will be against free speech in our country. That will be a very bad precedent. And I hope that it won't be this in US. You won't have the same kind of legislation. But more people now are speaking against that bill, and I don't know what will happen in a couple of weeks. We'll see. But that's the Trudeau government, authoritarian government, telling people what they can do, what they cannot do, and redistributing money that we don't have. It's not about growth, and because of that, the country. We are losing our culture with mass immigration. We are losing our standard of living with the inflation and the spending. And now we are losing our freedom of thought, freedom of speech with that bill, if that bill is enforced.
Right. It's very chilling, and I think you're absolutely right. I think this is exactly why Americans and others in other countries should really be paying attention to what's happening in Canada, so that we can be vigilant that we don't see the same sort of thing seeping through into other countries. It's already happening in Scotland, and it feels like they got a little bit of a leg up on Canada, but Canada wants to catch up as quickly as possible. Crazy. The
Yeah.
the budget document typically acts as a bit of a confidence vote. So for our audience that doesn't know the parliamentary system, that typically means that if the budget document doesn't get the votes it needs to pass, the ruling government doesn't have the confidence of the House, and then an election gets automatically triggered. So if there is discontent with the Trudeau government and with what's in this current budget, how is it possible that the current coalition of the Liberals and the New Democratic Party are still able to prop each other up? Why isn't that changing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, I strongly believe that the Trudeau government, as you may know, is a minority government. So yes, Trudeau will need the support of the NDP or the Bloc Québécois to be able to pass his budget. And you're right, if the budget cannot pass, if the budget is not approved by the House, will be an election right now this spring. So the vote for the budget will happen in a couple of weeks. And I believe that the NDP will vote with the Liberals and the budget will pass. Why? Because it is not in the interest of Justin Trudeau to have an election right now. He's losing the polls and people are not so happy. So for him, he needs more time to try to convince people and change the public opinion. And I believe that he won't be able to do that. And he won't be able to win the next election in October 2025. So, and for the NDP, why are they supporting the Conservative? Because also, if there's an election right now, the NDP won't be able to elect the same number of members of parliament. So for the new leader, he needs to show that he can grow his party. And actually, also the NDP asks for some socialist policies like daycare, dental care. That all that is under provincial jurisdictions. But the Trudeau government is saying yes to the NDP, and they are implementing national program, national dental care program, daycare programs. And so the NDP is very happy with that. The NDP will be able to say to his radical leftist socialist voters, look, because of me, we were able to have these new programs at the federal level. So I believe that Trudeau will be able to have the support of the NDP or the Bloc Québécois, and will be in election only in a year, because in October, that's the maximum for Trudeau in our constitution. So October 2025. And for us as the People's Party, if there's an election this spring, we will be ready. We will have our candidates. If we don't have an election, we have more time to do the selection of our candidates. But we'll be ready at any time. And our platform, it's easy. It's always the same. So we don't need to do polling or focus group. It's always the same thing, always the same platform. And we have a lot of our candidates who were with us in 2019, 2021, will be back with us. So I hope for Canadians that we can have an election as soon as possible, but I doubt, and we'll have to wait until 2025.
Right. The last election that brought Trudeau in was very much kind of geared towards a youth, millennial, Gen Z type a crowd, and these are the same people who are on social media now saying, "I can't make it work. I don't understand how people are even surviving." There was a viral video of a young woman in Canada who said, I really don't know how we're going to make it. And it seems like the only way to survive is to actually leave Canada, but we can't even afford to do that. So this is the sentiment that we're certainly seeing filtered through social media, and whether or not it's actually the right sentiment. But how how is the Trudeau government trying to appease that group of people, and what are the kind of strategies that you're looking at to to latch on to that feeling that things have not been going well with Trudeau? Here's another way. How can you kind of message to that group of people, the youth?
Yeah, I must say that in the public polls, we have a lot of support from young men from 18 to 25 years old. As I said, as on average in Canada, the last election we had 5%, but for a young male from 18 to 25%, we are at around 15%. So it's going well. We need to be more present there, but they're open to our vision for the country. What Trudeau is doing, that's why he's spending all that money on housing, because he knows that it's important for them. They want to be able to have an apartment in a and not paying the the cost that it's the cost that we have to pay right now in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. So it's very, very expensive. So that's why he has all these programs, and they think that it will be effective, and he will have all these young people back. But I doubt. They voted for him at that time. They voted for him for the legalization of marijuana and the pot, and that was a new era. But right now they have to work. They are paying taxes, and they cannot afford a house. So and now they're looking to another alternative. And for them, the alternative is the Conservative Party of Canada or us. Our big challenge that we have, a lot of people in Canada are fed up with the Trudeau government. And when I'm traveling out west, they're telling me, Maxime, I like your platform, I like everything, but the most important for me is to get rid of Trudeau. And I don't want to split the vote. I will vote for the Conservative, but I really like you. So for me, if a couple of weeks before the general election in Canada, Poilievre is very high in the poll, and they're showing that Poilievre will have a majority government, that is not bad news for us, because I'll be able to say to Canadians, look at the polls. You will have what you want. You're gonna get you will get rid of Justin Trudeau. Poilievre will win, and now you can vote in line with your ideas. You can vote for what you believe. You can have a positive vote and vote for the People's Party, because we're gonna keep Pierre Poilievre honest, and we will support him if he's a real conservative and he's have conservative policies, and we'll shame him when he won't. So it's a win-win. And I believe that we'll be able to grow and to increase our percentage of the vote, and maybe to have some candidates elected. We'll see. But the economy is so bad in Canada right now that Poilievre will win the election easy, and that's why he doesn't want to speak about issues that are not controversial with the mainstream media. And that's why my goal is to explain to Canadians they need us to bring these issues in the public debate, and pushing the mainstream political parties like Poilievre to speak about these important issues like immigration, balancing the budget, cutting foreign aid, cutting CBC, and all that.
Right. Yeah, at least getting people to ask him those questions and keeping him honest, as you said. So if you put the message out there, that at least plants the seed for people. I mean, at some point, do you think we'll ever get off of this philosophy that you vote against, like people, like you just said, people want to vote out Justin Trudeau, so they'll just vote for the other guy, whoever it might be.
Yeah.
Um, how do we shift that so that we actually get to a point where we can use our vote properly, not strategically, and vote for what we believe in and actually have get back our democracy?
Yeah, it's a big challenge, but actually, we were able to convince more people to vote for us and in line with our values. It took 15 years. I like to say that's the reality. The Green Party of Canada was created in 1984, and it took them 15 years to have more than 1% of the vote. We did that in our first year. We had 1.6%. It took them 21 years to have one candidate elected, Elizabeth May, in 2011. And I can tell you, it won't take 20 years for me to be elected or one of our candidates. So we are growing, triple our score, and more people understand that if you want to change something, you vote for what you want. You have more chances to have what you want if you vote for what you want. And what I'm saying, people, it's a revolution. It's a peaceful revolution that we need to do in our country. You cannot do that in a year or in an election. We are there, we are doing that, and more people are coming and they understand that. So I hope at the next election we'll be able to double our score from 5 to 10 with more people. But it's always a challenge because actually, the big challenge that we have is to be in touch with Canadians. And that's why I'm looking at, like you said before, Robert F. Kennedy. He is very active in the social media, podcasts, and all that. And that is our strategy also. That's why I'm with you. You gave me a nice opportunity. And yes, we need to be active on social media and in the real life, and that's what I'm doing. And if we have more time before the election, and if like I think the election will be only in October 2025, that will give me more time to travel, to build the party, and to have more support. But it is the big challenge. Tell people, don't vote against something, vote for something, and that's a challenge. You're right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great message for us and you to share with everybody who's watching this video. And I hope that we get a chance to talk again before that election happens next October. In the meantime, before we let you go, if people want to learn a little bit more about you and your party, where can they go to find out more?
They can go on our website, People's Party of Canada, the People's Party of Canada.ca. They can follow me on Twitter, X, on Facebook and social media. But the most important, if they go on our website, just click on electoral platform. You have all our policies over there, 21 policies. You can read it. It's two pages for each policy, very easy to read. That's the foundation of the party. And people must understand that we created that party based on 4 principles: individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. And all our policies are in line with that. So if you believe in these 4 principles, I'm pretty sure that you like our platform. And if you like that, please support us. If you don't like what I'm saying or our electoral platform, and you want to have a big government, don't vote for us. Don't waste your vote. Vote for another establishment political party.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's great to have you back on Collapse Life, Max, and good luck. As I said, I hope that we get a chance to speak again in the short term.
Oh, we will. We will. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye. Well, friends, we come to the end of another great interview. We want to keep being able to bring amazing guests like Maxime Bernier on. So please help us out. Share this video with other people and stand up for the call for fiscal responsibility, fiscal restraint, and personal freedom. Share this far and wide. The team here at Collapse Life works very hard to bring you insightful content like this each week. So please give this video a like and a share on whatever platform you're on. And also find us on Substack, collapselife.substack.com. Sign up for our weekly newsletter and join the community there. Join the conversation on Twitter also at collapse_life. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome and thanks for being here. Collapse Life is your home for information to understand and prepare for our changing world. We like to call it a lifestyle channel for a dying lifestyle. And we hope you'll join us again next week for another amazing guest. Until then, just remember to keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.